Uh, well, first of all, thank you guys for all being here today. It's a real pleasure to be here after traveling all across the United States and Canada touring with this book. It's a little bittersweet to be finishing up with this series and to be, to finally know that it's out there and it's actually done, although I'm also very happy about that as well. But today's event is very, very special. Today's event is very special because for two reasons. Wait for the voice of God there. It's very special for two reasons. One, because this is the very last event I am ever going to be doing on tour with this book in the United States. And I get to do that, and this is the other special part, I get to do that here at Hastings, which, as some of you may or may not know, this is the store where I did my very first book signing with the self-published edition of Aragon. Yeah. And I did it right in front of those doors over there, and I had a table, and I stood behind that table for 8 hours, and I didn't leave, and I talked to every single person who came through the doors, and I tried to sell them a copy of Aragon. In fact, I still remember my little spiel, too. It was pretty simple, but it went like this. You walk through the door, and it was, "Hi, my name is Christopher Paolini. Do you enjoy reading and good books?" Well, of course you do. You're in a bookstore. But you enjoy good books? Well, then, can I interest you in a copy of Aragon? It's the story of a young man named Aragon who becomes intricately linked with this brilliant sapphire blue baby dragon named Saphira. And together they go on a series of adventures, and there are duels and dragons and battles and villains and romance and all the good stuff a story needs. And if you buy now, I can give you a discount, and I'd be happy to sign it for you or any member of your family or friends or distant acquaintances. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And I guarantee if you read the first page, you won't be able to stop. For 8 hours straight. Which was rather exhausting. Plus, I did it while dressed in medieval costume, which was also rather exhausting. In fact, when I wrote Aragon, and my family and I, we decided to self-publish it, we decided that I was going to wear the costume to get attention for the books. And it was kind of a fun costume. It consisted of black knee-high lace-up leather boots, billowy black pantaloons, a big black pirate belt, a billowy red swordsman shirt, and a black beret to top it off. And since, I started writing Aragon when I was 15, and I was only about 17 or so when we self-published, and the first presentation I did was in our local high school in Livingston. And so I walked in, for the very first time I ever went into a public school, I walked in dressed like that. And when I went to the library where I was doing the event, from the back of the library, I heard some guy, he was the same age as me, he looked at me and he went, "Hello, Romeo!" So, as you can see, I don't wear the costume anymore. It's been, from start to finish, this series, though, has been an amazing journey. When I set out to write Aragon, I just graduated from high school, graduated at 15, because I was basically the result of not taking any summer breaks my whole life. And I was very bored. I didn't have anything to do. I didn't have a job. Couldn't drive. The nearest town was over a half hour away. And so I decided to try to write the sort of story that I would enjoy reading myself. And since I really enjoyed reading fantasy, I thought it would be really cool to have all the things I enjoyed about fantasy all in one book. So to have the magic sword and the dragons and the elves and the dwarves and the wise old mentor and the young hero and the evil villain. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about how that story would work, and then I sat down and actually started writing Aragon. And when I wrote it, I tried to have fun, because I figured if I had fun, that readers would have fun as well. So, for example, one of the things I did was I put in the character of Angela the Herbalist, who some of you may know is actually based on my sister, Angela. Unfortunately, she has a very good sense of humor about it, or else I wouldn't be standing here right now. And then when I finished the manuscript, I sat down and I read it through for the very first time. And I was really excited. I got to read my own book for the first time. It was horrible. It was awful. The story was there, but the writing itself needed a lot of help. So I said, okay, I'm going to try to fix this. And in fact, I never used to tell anyone this, but since the series is done, I can tell you guys, when I first, in the very first draft, Aragon wasn't named Aragon. Aragon was named Kevin. And by the way, if your name's Kevin, it's a great name. I like the name. But I don't think the series would have been half so popular if it had been about the adventures of the great dragon rider, Kevin. I also had Kevin running into a unicorn at one point, so, you know, it needed help. So I spent another year and I rewrote the book, and then I gave it to my parents. And fortunately for me, they enjoyed it enough that we decided we were going to make it a family business, self-publish it, and see if we could, you know, see what kind of a response we would get. And that's how I ended up here at Hastings and the Livingston Library and all across the western half of the United States doing events in medieval costume. But it was a great experience, and you know, eventually the author Carl Hyacin came up to Montana and he caught wind of Aragon, bought a copy right in Livingston actually, and he passed it on to Random House, and Random House ended up contacting me. And the rest, as they say, is history. I wrote then Eldest and Brissinger, and now finally Inheritance. And, you know, I just had a great, great time along the way. For example, right before I went on book tour for Eldest, I was at home preparing for the tour. Well, actually, I was supposed to be preparing for the tour. I was actually playing video games. I was playing Jedi Knight Academy 2. And I was logged in to the internet, so I was dueling players from all around the world. We're dueling with lightsabers. And someone logged into the game using the name Aragon. And I said to myself, oh, I've got to fight this guy. So I went over and I challenged him to a duel, and we fought. And the horrible thing is, he was better than me. And he beat me. And across the screen it said, "You have been killed by Aragon." I didn't need to see that. And then with Brissinger, I was in Chicago doing a signing, and a young woman came through my signing line, and on her arm she was carrying a sugar glider. And for those of you who don't know, a sugar glider is kind of like a flying squirrel, but it's a marsupial, so it has a pouch in the front. And they're very, 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 very cute. So I looked at the woman and I said, well, that's an interesting animal. Do you mind if I pet it? And she said, oh, sure, go right ahead. He loves strangers. So I reach out and I started petting the sugar glider. And it looked up at me. And it took its hands, because they have hands kind of like a raccoon. And it wrapped its fingers around my finger. And then ever so politely, it began to gnaw on me. And I was sitting there, and there was blood running down my hand. And I was saying to the woman, will you please stop your pet from trying to eat me? I'm kind of glad it happened, though, because it makes for a great story. And I'm now one of the few people in the world who can say that I have been gnawed on by a marsupial. So I figure that's some kind of achievement. You know, it's like an achievement in the Xbox, you know, chewed on by a marsupial, 200 points. And then when I was finishing Inheritance, I was in New York City at the Random House headquarters in New York City. And during the very last week of work on the book and on the series as a whole, during that week of work, New York City got hit by both an earthquake and a hurricane. And my editor came to me and she said, Christopher, I love you dearly, but you really, really have to finish this book before any more natural disasters occur. So finish it I did, and I have to say I'm very proud of it and really, really glad that it's finally in your hands and that people get to read the end of the story and see the story as a whole the way that I've always been able to. And before I take some questions here, there's something I want to do that I've actually wanted to do ever since Aragon came out, but it hasn't been possible until Inheritance was published. And what I want to do is, I want to read you guys a very short excerpt, just a line or two, from each of the 4 books. Okay? Yeah? Well, as you might notice, though, I don't actually have any books up here with me. So, who has a copy of Aragon? Aragon? Bring one up. Anyone who's got one. All right. Here we go. Thank you. I do promise I will give it back. I know how it ends. I also have more than a few copies myself. Okay, so, assuming I can find the page here, I am going to read you the very first line from the very first chapter of the very first book of the Inheritance Cycle. Hope you enjoy. Wind howled through the night, carrying a scent that would change the world. All right, who's got eldest?
Here, we do this one.
Here we go. Ooh, deluxe edition. Nice. So one of my favorite things in working on this series was creating the various invented languages. And, oh geez, I forgot there's all this extra material in the deluxe edition. 1 second. Here we go. Okay, so the two main ones, of course, are the ancient language, which is the elf language, and the dwarf language. And the ancient language I based partially on Old Norse, which I thought gave it a nice sound and feel. And so I'm going to read you a blessing that the elves do in the ancient language. However, I have to apologize because I have a really horrible elvish accent. And that's because in Elvish, you're supposed to roll your R's on the tip of your tongue, the way you would in Spanish or Italian. And the only way I can roll my R's is by, I know this sounds rather obscene, is by wiggling my uvula. So, I'm going to wiggle my uvula at you guys, and I hope you like it too. Atra sterni on a thelduin, bar on a leaf on in hart to honor. Undu Everina Onovarda.